Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into the ProRevenge archives. Our first story today comes to us from Mercury for Real. I recruited an unwitting army to annoy a butthole. Let's jump right in. Back in the early 90s, my friend, I'll call him Lou because that's his name, was selling his RX-7 via an ad in the old print auto trader. It came out every Thursday, so that first weekend was critical for sales. The very first guy that came to see it on Saturday said he wanted to buy it after driving it. Of course, he had to finance, so they couldn't finish the sale during the weekend. Lou was worried about losing all the bites from the new ad, so he asked for a deposit of $500. The guy wrote a check. Lou told the rest of the callers that weekend that it was sold and, unfortunately, didn't ask for their numbers in case it fell through. This story predates caller ID availability in my area by a couple years, so those leads were gone. As you surely expect by now, the guy flakes on Monday and Lou deposits the check. Payment stopped. Big surprise. Sitting around my apartment, we schemed revenge, but all we had to go on was the check. Lucky for karma, there was a phone number printed on it. Our first idea was to write a little program to dial his number repeatedly from my modem, but that would be easily stopped and probably get us in direct trouble. Then, Lou got a page from his work. This was back in the one-way pager days. You call the pager's dedicated phone number, it sounds a tone, then you punch digits for the number you want to be sent to the pager. The person with the pager receives the number you entered and, presumably, calls it. Everyone with a pager made sure that people who needed to get a hold of them had the number for their pager. You'd see pager numbers in print and TV ads all the time for various services. Boom, angelic choir sings, heavenly light goes off. Lou's pager number and my pager number have the same prefix, middle 3 digits. What if we randomly dial numbers with that prefix and page them all to this guy's number? So we order a pizza, open some beers, and start looking through the yellow pages at locksmiths and tow truck services to find more pager prefixes. We wind up with a dozen or so. After that, it's half an hour of coding in ye old Borland C++. I put together a program that would cycle through our list of known prefixes and add a random final 4 digits to get a random pager. It calls the pager's number, pauses, then dials this butthole's number and throws a 911 suffix on there for good measure, which is something people with pagers understood to indicate an emergency of some kind. The whole thing was just generating a string like ATDT602 XXXYYYY butthole number 911, where XXX is the pager prefix and YYYY is random. Commas make pauses since you need to connect to the pager service before you can enter the message, make string, send to modem, wait for no carrier, hang up, repeat. We start eating the pizza and let it fly. I was very picky about my devices. So my modem was a US Robotics Courier. You could set an S register to control how long it would sound each tone when dialing. Uber nerds like myself would keep tinkering with that to get it as fast as possible while still being recognized by the phone service. It was very fast. I swear it could run through 4 pages per minute, so this guy would get 240 calls per hour. We just watched it run and laughed our butts off. We realized pretty early on that we didn't really know if it was working, so we wandered down to the 7-Eleven and called him from a payphone, just in case he could somehow trace it or the popo were on the case and watching. A man answered and I said, "Hello, I got a page at this number." I heard an audible sigh and then he just hung up. Gold! We ended up running it for a few hours, then let it go quiet for a few days, then we scheduled it to start dialing in the middle of the night every few days. Plus, we'd fire it up by hand randomly whenever we had a party. We checked again from the 7-Eleven after a week, and it went to an answering machine, which did the rapid tone at the end of the greeting to indicate the tape was full. We reasoned that the line was still ringing anyway, so we kept at it for another month or so. Eventually, we got the disconnect warning when we made one of our regular checkups. I'm sure he just changed the number. I like to think about that guy answering the phone after a few days of silence when we started it up. I can vividly imagine his response at the "Did someone page me to this number?" as he slams the phone down and then rings it again a few seconds later. Or, of course, coming home from work, and having an answering machine full of random people asking about being paged. And yeah, we annoyed several thousand people into calling this guy by the end, but each of those people was only put out for a single call. A cost? Yes, but a necessary one for justice. OP mentioned in the comments down below that the car did get sold, but it took a few more weeks because that first wave was absolutely huge. Because when that Auto Trader came out, you'd have to wait another week for the next one to come out so people could see the ads again. You know, the days before the internet when everybody didn't want everything instantaneously. I guess they learned in this case not to accept a check too, and next time just ask for a deposit in cash, even if it's only $50. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from a deleted account. How a man lost $8 million for failing to be a decent human. Let's jump right in. Alright, I have a story to tell from the finance industry. For those of you who don't know what we do, it's basically just being a realtor, but for companies instead of houses. This was a small investment banking firm, and we specialize in smaller players. We're talking companies worth $20 to $50 million. Our customers are typically salt of the earth, built their tire company from nothing but a shed and a truck over the last 30 years, and now they want to retire. But seeing as how many of them never learned accounting and whatnot, they need representation. Now, one company has two 50% owners, and they hate each other. Can't have a civil conversation. Now, having two 50-50 owners is always a recipe for conflict, but this level of hatred was something I hadn't seen before. It was pretty clear one of the two had done something pretty bad for it to devolve to this stage. So let's call one Tim and one Roger. My first impression of Roger is that he's a nice dude, down to earth, chill, and generally interested in things. My first impression of Tim is that he's a raging imbecile. We were at a restaurant I and many other people in my city hold in very high regard, and all he did for an hour and a half was complain about the food. He talked down to and mocked a waiter who dared ask him what he'd like to drink and proceeded to order $1,000 of wine he knew we were paying. My boss, having none of that, made it clear Tim is paying for that bottle, which I suppose put him in a bad mood. I am somewhat obsessed with food. I spend an unwise amount of money on food. I can sing you all of the instrumental parts in the opening to Heston Blumenthal's cooking show. We're here on my recommendation. I love this darn restaurant, and I am on first name terms with that waiter. The man starts talking down to me about my taste after I order, says kids these days have no palate, and that I shouldn't be eating X. Oh, and also, apparently, donating to vaccine charities is a waste of money, and I am some sort of idiot for doing so. So, to be short, I don't like the guy, but not liking the guy isn't really a reason to seek revenge. However, after talking to Roger, we found out why they hate each other. You see, Tim had been stealing money from his employees and the company. It turns out, employees started getting random checks bounced, and the company's line of credit kept drying up because Tim had been making some rather extravagant purchases on the company dime. He had adjusted employee payroll downwards and increased his own. He had used capital expenditures to build himself a house. Apparently, his continued justification is that none of what he did was illegal, technically true. He had helped grow the company, I suppose, and that he deserved more, but not his business partner. Roger ended up comping employees out of his own pocket, and Tim refused to pay back a dime. So at this point, the deal talks are going nowhere, as in Tim and Roger just cannot stand to communicate with each other at all. But my boss, he hatches an idea. Why don't we just buy one of them out? We know how much the company is worth in the wider market. We'll just see if either is willing to take some cash up front for their share of the equity. I make models all day. I know how much this company is worth. It's worth about $24 million. Tim's stake is therefore worth $12 million. Complex, I know. Guess whose stake I suggest we buy? Tim's, of course. How much do I suggest we offer? $4 million. Now, to be clear, this type of thing has a downside, but Tim's reputation in his industry isn't good. In fact, after some canvassing, it turns out that most people know this company through Roger and don't like to deal with Tim. Turns out being a thieving butthole is something one simply cannot turn off. Boss says okay, he'll send an offer letter and NDA agreement, etc. Tim bites for $6 million. We sold the company 6 weeks later for $28 million total. F you, Tim. Now, the interesting thing about the comments on this one is there was a bunch of comments from people doing corporate law right now that were mentioning that there was a big problem with what had been done in this story, that there was a breach of fiduciary duty here, and all of a sudden OP deleted their account. That's all I have to say about that story. Our next story today comes to us from Gatorboy Actual. Costa timeshare scam all their sales for lying and make $5,000 doing it. Let's jump right in. This is the story of how a friend of mine nuked a timeshare scam a few years back and took them to the cleaners. Background: friend of mine is a big dude, maybe 6'3" and 250 pounds, and a no-nonsense military NCO. Likes his booze and likes to have a good time when he's off the clock. We'll call him JB. One day, he got one of those win a free week-long cruise, all expenses paid phone calls. He decides to look into it because why the hell not? Calls the numbers back and gets a lady on the other end who gives him the rundown of how the cruise thing works. It sounds too good to be true. So he asks her, is there some kind of timeshare BS or other strings attached to this? She assures him that no, there is not. He goes for it and signs up for a cruise a few months later during a block of leave. Revenge. In order to claim the cruise, he and his wife had to show up a day early to a hotel near the port where the cruise was departing. Room is paid for already as a part of the cruise package. They show up the day before and check in with the front desk. The concierge asks if they'd like to upgrade to the VIP package for $20, which includes free drinks at the hotel bar. F yes, he takes the upgrade and heads to the bar. JB is a social drinker, and when he gets liquored up, he starts socializing with the other bar patrons. He finds out that they are also there for the cruise, and that there is a mandatory presentation the next morning that everyone has to go to. JB starts to smell a rat. This sounds an awful lot like a timeshare scam. Well, he's having none of it, and being good and drunk, he rallies all the cruise goers around him, about 30 people, gets up on a table, and delivers a William Wallace-style speech about how they don't have to deal with these timeshare scam artists. Within minutes, he's whipped the crowd into a frenzy and convinced everyone not to buy into whatever the presentation is selling. Sure enough, the next morning, everyone shows up to the presentation to claim their cruise. They are told the tickets will be given to them at the conclusion of the presentation. JB is drunk again because, well, free booze and he's on leave. JB starts to go back into Braveheart mode, getting real loud about how it's a scam, and he was told explicitly that there is no timeshare BS attached to this cruise. Well, the timeshare people instantly recognize JB is bad for business, so they usher him away from everyone else into a side room and try to talk sense into him. Sir, this is a mandatory presentation. We cannot give you a ticket for the cruise unless you go to this. BS, y'all specifically said there was no timeshare involved in this cruise. Sir, we have all our calls recorded, and it was very clearly outlined that you'd need to listen to this presentation. Good, let's pull up my recording and you show me when they said that. At this point, a big beefy security looking dude, not with the hotel, clearly a part of the timeshare company, tries to intervene because JB is getting louder and more angry. Putting a hand on JB's shoulder, sir, we're gonna have to. Back up, mother effer, I will rip off your head, crawl down your neck, and out your butthole. He sure had a way with words. Security meekly turns tail and runs. At this point, it is clear that they can't let JB into the presentation, or else he'll ruin everything. So the director of the program pulls JB into his office, basically tells JB that they listened to his call, and he's right. The lady had said there was no timeshare involved. The director admits that they aren't able to print his ticket until 12:30 p.m., the time the presentation was scheduled to end, because the company locks them in order to force people to go to the presentations. He says, come back at 12:30, I'll have your tickets, and I will upgrade you to premium for free if you just don't go anywhere near our presentation. Too easy. JB does exactly that and then heads to the boat. Premium was like the best cabin on the boat with, again, free booze and all sorts of awesome upgrades, including $5,000 on his account. Turns out everyone else who had to sit through the timeshare presentation almost missed the boat because it went so long. Not a single person bought a timeshare. and the presenters spent hours trying to convince them to. Eventually, they gave up and handed everyone their tickets in defeat. In total, they made $0 in sales and lost another $5,000 to JB's free premium upgrade. In the comment section down below, there were a couple of things that really made me laugh. It said, if you're really good at putting up with the BS and absolutely will not buy into their crap, you can game the timeshare system and get free stuff. You walk in, watch their presentation, and when they try to sell something to you, you just say, my credit score's a 495, and I'm pretty sure my car will have been repossessed by the time I get home. Let's do this. Boom. Presentation over. Our last story today comes to us from Restaurant Throwaway. The time a coworker stole my tip. Let's jump right in. The coworker in question was a pain in the butt, but she was a decent server and she did her side work, so whatevs. So this girl wanted to leave early one night. She had one table left and asked me to take them because they would be camping out for a while. I too had one table left that was just finishing up. So I said I'd take them if she didn't cash them out first. I wasn't going to stay on the clock to make $0 extra and clean her section. She threw an absolute fit, but eventually transferred the table. Now, I don't know why she transferred them because she stayed the whole time they were there. She walked around the whole restaurant and bar, trashing me to anyone who would listen. When it came time to cash them out, she went to the table and said something to them while I was running their cards and making change. Effing A. I handed them their slips and cash to the one guy who paid in cash. Someone at the table said, I don't know what you did to that girl, but she told us to not tip you. I said, I think she's just having a bad night. I thanked them for coming in and wished them a good night. I went to the POS and started entering tips while I waited for them to leave. I was fuming, but the table was happy with me, so I wasn't going to let it get to me. My B of a coworker slides into the seat. I was like, the F? So I hustle down there and I can see her looking at the slips. When I get to the table, she is getting up and has $4 cash in her hand. Now, everyone at the table left me a 20%-ish tip, except for the cash guy who left me nothing on a $20 check. 20% times $20 equals $4. It was at this point that I lost my crap. I asked her if she took money off my table. I'd like to say I was calm and collected, but I'm sure that I wasn't. She runs screaming to the manager that I accused her of stealing. I explained the whole situation to the manager, who I'm sure will see reason. He opts to check the security footage, but no, the recording wasn't working. So now it's my word versus hers, which should be a slam dunk in my favor, but what can they really do? If they fire her for cause, they need proof. And I didn't actually see her take the money, just holding $4 in her hand as she left my table. Okay, B, you won the battle, but you will lose the war. Now here comes the really effed up part. My next shift, the regional manager comes in to talk to me about the whole situation. She acknowledges that she believes me, but there's nothing she can do about it. And then she instructs me to apologize to the girl. Ha, fat chance. I agreed to do it, but obviously never did. Well, it was around that point that I moved to the bar full-time. I had several weapons of revenge at my disposal, but the best one in my arsenal, by far, was that I now knew that she was extremely inflammatory. I could set her off with the smallest of actions, all while keeping my cool and appearing to do nothing wrong. One time I coughed as she walked away from service bar. She thought I called her a name. Instant meltdown, run screaming to the manager. One time I poured her service bar ticket, but left the last beer sitting under the tap instead of on the service bar. Instant meltdown, run screaming to the manager. One time I said her name quietly under my breath, so only she could hear it. Then I pretended like I didn't say anything. Instant meltdown, run screaming to the manager. The real key was to wait for a night when she was already in a bad mood, then do it 2 or 3 times in a row, then wait a few weeks to do it again. That way, it looked like she was just being a child and taking it out on me since she already had a beef with me. It worked like a charm. She got crappier shifts, crappier sections, and in turn, crappier tips. As her frustration grew, so did her outbursts. Eventually, she got fired for threatening to have her boyfriend beat me up within earshot of a manager, fired on the spot. Check and mate, B. The whole process took about 5 months. Was it petty? Yes. Was it childish and passive-aggressive? Absolutely. Was it all over $4? Yep. Was it satisfying? Oh, it was so satisfying. I'm just loving the comments that I read down below today. One of them says, methodical, sustained course of revenge, all the while keeping your cool, slowly chipping away at the other person, causing them to lose their cool over time and in turn get themselves fired. Well played. Check out all 4 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.